It was a Tuesday morning like any other, or so Jerome thought. Cruising down the street in his friend Malcolm's sleek black sedan, he had no idea that this simple act would shatter his world. He was a model citizen, respected in his community, with a spotless record. Integrity, honor, and hard work were drilled into him from a young age by his strict but loving parents. But now, the flashing red and blue lights behind him told a different story. His heart pounded as his mind raced. What could this be? When the officer approached the car, Jerome's instincts told him this was just another routine stop. But that's when the nightmare began. "License and registration," the officer demanded, barely looking at him. No warning, no explanation. As Jerome handed over the documents, his stomach tightened with unease. He was calm, but something was off. The officer didn't answer his question, simply walking away. Moments later, he was surrounded by backup. "Step out of the vehicle, sir." The words sliced through the air like a blade. The accusation that followed hit him like a punch in the gut. His friend's car was stolen, they said. Stolen? No, that was impossible. This was his friend's car. But it didn't matter. Jerome was already being cuffed. The humiliation was unbearable as pedestrians gawked, whispering. Everything he knew about justice and fairness felt like a cruel joke. In that moment, Jerome knew his life had just been changed forever. Jerome's world had flipped upside down, but nothing prepared him for what would happen next. Still reeling from the humiliation of his arrest, he found himself sitting in the cold, sterile courtroom, facing an unforgiving judge. The walls seemed to close in on him as he adjusted his charcoal gray suit. His heart raced as his mind struggled to make sense of the chaos that had become his life. His only hope now was his lawyer, but she was nowhere to be found. And then, the doors opened. A sudden shift in the atmosphere rippled through the room. All heads turned as Amanda Carter entered. She wasn't just another lawyer, she was a force. At 33, sharp as a tack, dressed in a navy blue power suit, she exuded an energy that instantly commanded attention. The click of her heels echoed like a warning as she strode to the defense table with absolute confidence. Jerome had never seen someone move with such purpose, such calm. She wasn't just here to defend him, she was here to fight for him. The judge, Simon Drake, who had been making snide comments and playing to the courtroom's every whim, suddenly looked small in comparison. His usual air of superiority faltered as Amanda locked eyes with him. Jerome couldn't look away. He was captivated. Who was this woman who seemed so unshakable in the face of such power? Amanda set her briefcase down with a deliberate thud, her movements sharp and purposeful. She didn't waste a second before turning to the judge. "Your Honor," she began, her voice calm but cutting through the tension in the room. "We need to address some glaring issues with this case, starting with the fact that the charges against my client are based on lies." The courtroom gasped. Jerome's breath hitched. He had barely dared to hope for a defense this strong. But Amanda wasn't finished. She was just warming up. She launched into the specifics, tearing apart the prosecution's case like a skilled surgeon with a scalpel. The so-called stolen car? The owner never filed a report. Funny how that detail was conveniently overlooked. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Jerome's mind was reeling. How had this woman known all of this? How had she uncovered the flaws in the case that everyone else had missed? But Amanda wasn't done. She laid out more facts, more cracks in the prosecution's case. The dashcam footage conveniently malfunctioned. Witnesses had caught the arrest on their phones, but those recordings had been ignored. The officer had questioned him for hours without a lawyer present. The tide had shifted. In that instant, the courtroom went from a place of dread to a battlefield. Amanda had transformed Jerome's hopeless situation into a fight for justice. Jerome couldn't believe what he was hearing. For the first time in weeks, he felt something powerful rise inside him. Hope. Jerome had always been the kind of person who played by the rules. Raised in a strict but loving household, integrity and hard work were his guiding principles. For as long as he could remember, he had done everything the right way, graduating from college, landing a stable job as a software engineer, and keeping his nose clean. His friends knew him as the fixer, the reliable one who always knew what to do when trouble arose. In his mind, the system worked. If you did the right thing, justice would be on your side. But the moment he found himself in that police cruiser, he realized the system wasn't as dependable as he had thought. A stolen car accusation. Handcuffs. The crowd of onlookers whispering as if he were a criminal. Jerome couldn't fathom it. He was just an ordinary guy who followed the rules. This wasn't supposed to happen to him. Then came Amanda Carter. When she walked into that courtroom, she wasn't just a lawyer. She was something else entirely. It wasn't just her reputation that was intimidating. It was her presence. She exuded power, not in a way that made her come across as cold, but in a way that made you believe in her, trust her, and most importantly, know she could get things done. Amanda wasn't like the typical high-powered celebrity lawyer you might see on TV. No, she had the kind of grit that only comes from having lived through real-world struggles. She wasn't here to play games. She was here to win. Jerome couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as she took control of the courtroom. It wasn't just about the law. It was about something deeper. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a fight for what was right. And Amanda wasn't going to let a broken system tear down someone who didn't deserve it. She wasn't just defending him. She was standing up for everything he had always believed in: truth, justice, and fairness. He could feel the difference in the way the courtroom reacted to her. The judge, who had been all too eager to dismiss Jerome's case, was suddenly on the defensive. The jury, who had initially seemed disinterested, were now hanging on Amanda's every word. Even the prosecution's smug attitude seemed to shrink in her presence. Amanda wasn't just another lawyer in a power suit. She was an embodiment of the very system that had failed him, fighting back to restore balance. Jerome had always believed in justice, but now he was seeing it in action in a way he had never expected. It wasn't just about the case. It was about people like Amanda, who reminded him that there were still warriors out there fighting for what was right, no matter the odds. As Jerome stood there in that courtroom, he couldn't shake the thought that had been gnawing at him since the moment he was arrested. How did it come to this? He had followed every rule, worked tirelessly to build a life based on integrity, and yet here he was, fighting for his freedom as if he were a criminal. The more he thought about it, the more the injustice of it all stung. He had done everything right, so why had he been accused of something he didn't do? Why was the system that had always seemed so steadfast, so reliable, suddenly so broken? Then Amanda walked in. Her arrival wasn't just timely, it was transformative. She wasn't just defending him, she was challenging the very foundation of a system that had failed him, and so many others like him. Amanda's approach wasn't about playing by the rules. It was about demanding that the rules were actually followed. She wasn't going to let a few presumptions and outdated prejudices dictate the outcome of this case. He sat up. For the first time, Jerome felt like someone was truly listening, not just to his words, but to the injustice that ran deeper than the surface. Amanda's fight wasn't just for Jerome. It was for everyone who had ever been overlooked, misunderstood, or falsely accused. She wasn't just a lawyer. She was a symbol of the kind of change the world needed. Through her words and actions, she exposed the cracks in the system that had long been ignored. In doing so, she showed Jerome and everyone watching that sometimes justice doesn't just happen, you have to fight for it. That's the lesson Jerome took away from this entire ordeal. He had always believed in the system, had always trusted that if you did the right thing, you'd be protected. But sometimes doing the right thing doesn't guarantee anything. Sometimes you have to be bold enough to stand up, to challenge the very structures that are supposed to protect you, and to fight for the justice you deserve. Amanda didn't just win the case. She taught Jerome a lesson that would stay with him forever. That justice isn't something that comes automatically. It's something you have to fight for, relentlessly, no matter how powerful or intimidating the forces against you may seem. As the trial reached its final days, Jerome couldn't shake the feeling that this battle wasn't just about him anymore. There was something else lingering beneath the surface, something deeper that he couldn't yet grasp. The system he had trusted so blindly, the very framework he had believed would protect him, had failed him in a way that was both shocking and unnerving. It made him wonder how many others had been crushed under the weight of this broken system. The more he thought about it, the more he began to question everything. Had this been an isolated incident? Or was there something more insidious at play? Jerome's gut told him there was more to the story than anyone was letting on, and it wasn't just the police or the prosecutor who were keeping secrets. Judge Simon Drake, the man who had been overseeing his case, seemed to have a hidden agenda of his own. Why had Drake been so determined to dismiss Amanda's arguments with such force? Why had he reacted so vehemently to her challenge of the system, as though he had something to lose? Jerome wasn't the only one in that courtroom feeling the weight of uncertainty. Amanda's unshakable confidence, her ability to expose the flaws in the case, had made Drake uncomfortable, almost desperate to hold on to his control. As the days went by, the courtroom buzzed with whispers. The defense had begun to chip away at the foundation of the prosecution's case, and more holes were emerging in the narrative they had so carefully constructed. But no one seemed to have an answer to the bigger question. Who was behind this? Was there someone manipulating the case from the shadows? Was there a reason this particular case had been pursued so aggressively? And if so, what did it mean for the others who found themselves caught in the same system? Jerome felt like he was just beginning to uncover a vast hidden web of corruption that stretched far beyond his own trial. Amanda, with her sharp mind and unwavering resolve, was his only hope. She had proven time and time again that she wasn't just playing the game. She was out to expose the truth, no matter what it took. Jerome had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went, but he knew one thing for sure. This case was about more than just stolen cars. It was about something much bigger,